Imagine a hillside in ancient Galilee. A crowd gathers around a carpenter-turned-rabbi who's about to deliver the most revolutionary manifesto the world has ever heard. Not a political revolution with swords and armies, but something far more radical. A complete inversion of human values, a blueprint for living that challenges everything we think we know about success, happiness, and what it means to be human. This is the Sermon on the Mount, and in 1978, theologian John Stott called it Christian counterculture for a reason. Because when Jesus sat down on that mountainside and began to teach, he wasn't offering self-help tips or religious platitudes. He was describing a kingdom so upside down, so contrary to the kingdoms of this world, that it would look like madness to anyone who hadn't glimpsed the coming age. Jesus begins with 8 blessings we call the Beatitudes, but these aren't congratulations for the successful. They are proclamations of a reality that turns everything upside down. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus says. Not the self-confident, not the self-made, but those who know their spiritual bankruptcy. The kingdom belongs to those who have nothing to offer. Blessed are those who mourn. Not the happy-go-lucky optimists, but those who grieve over sin, over brokenness, over the gap between what is and what should be. Blessed are the meek. Not the aggressive achievers, but those who have power under control, who don't demand their rights, who trust God's justice rather than their own strength. Stott saw something crucial here. These aren't entrance requirements for the kingdom. They are descriptions of what kingdom citizens look like. They are the values of a community that's tasted the age to come and can't settle for the shallow satisfactions of the present age. The world says, blessed are the rich, the carefree, the powerful, the popular, the winners. Jesus says the complete opposite, and this isn't just poetic imagery. This is a fundamental challenge to every human culture that's ever existed. Then Jesus shifts metaphors. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Think about what salt did in the ancient world. It preserved food from decay. It added flavor. It was valuable, essential, impossible to ignore when it was present, but salt that's lost its saltiness, worthless, thrown out. Light illuminates. It reveals what's hidden in darkness. It guides. It warns. It cannot be hidden when it's burning brightly. A city on a hill is visible for miles. Here's Stott's penetrating insight. Christians are called to be different without being irrelevant. We're supposed to influence culture without being absorbed by it. We preserve without decaying. We illuminate without burning out. This is the paradox of counterculture. We're not called to retreat into religious ghettos, building walls between us and the world. But we're also not called to blend in, to become indistinguishable from the culture around us. We're salt and light, which means we have to be in contact with the world, but we cannot lose our essential character. The church has always struggled with this tension. Sometimes we withdraw into isolation. Sometimes we compromise until there's no difference left. Jesus calls us to a third way, engaged difference, transformative presence. Now Jesus gets specific. He takes the law everyone knows, the commandments from Moses, and he doesn't abolish them. He fulfills them. He shows what they really meant all along. You've heard it said, don't murder, but I tell you, anyone who harbors anger toward a brother is guilty. You've heard, don't commit adultery, but I tell you, anyone who looks with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. This is not legalism. This is something far more demanding. Jesus is saying that God cares about the heart, not just the action. External compliance without internal transformation is worthless. The righteousness of the kingdom must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, who were experts at keeping rules while their hearts remained unchanged. Stott calls this the higher righteousness, and it's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because who can achieve this? Who can control not just their actions but their thoughts, their desires, their internal reactions? Liberating because it exposes the futility of mere external religion and points us toward the only solution. A transformed heart, a new nature, the work of God's Spirit within us. Jesus addresses murder and anger, adultery and lust, divorce and hardness of heart, oaths and simple truthfulness, revenge and radical love for enemies. In every case, he's pushing past the surface to the heart. He's describing citizens of a kingdom where love is the fulfilling of the law, where purity isn't about avoiding external contamination, but about cultivating internal holiness. Then Jesus teaches his disciples to pray, and the prayer he gives them is a masterpiece of simplicity and depth. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Notice what comes first, not our needs, not our requests, but God's glory, God's name, God's reputation. The first half of the Lord's Prayer is entirely about God, His name, His kingdom, His will. Only after we've oriented ourselves around God's purposes do we turn to our needs: daily bread, forgiveness, protection from evil. Stott points out that this prayer shapes the entire Christian life. We don't come to God as consumers, presenting our wish list. We come as children who trust our Father, as subjects who want the King's will to be done, as creatures who acknowledge that everything we need comes from Him. And the request for forgiveness is directly connected to our forgiveness of others. Forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. This isn't earning God's forgiveness by forgiving others. It's recognizing that those who have truly experienced God's forgiveness will extend that same forgiveness to others. Unforgiveness is incompatible with understanding the gospel. This is countercultural because the world's spirituality is often self-centered, transactional, focused on getting what we want from a divine vending machine. Jesus teaches a prayer that dethrones self and enthroned God, that seeks His kingdom before our comfort. Jesus then addresses something that dominates human life: possessions, wealth, security, the anxious pursuit of enough. Don't store up treasures on earth, He says, where moths and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. Store up treasures in heaven. Why? Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is a diagnostic test. Show me your bank statement, your calendar, your internet history, and I'll show you what you really treasure. We can claim to value eternal things, but our actual behavior reveals our true values. Then Jesus makes an even more radical statement. You cannot serve both God and money. Not it's difficult or you shouldn't try. You cannot. It's impossible. Because God demands total allegiance and money, personified as mammon, also demands total allegiance. You will serve one or the other. And then comes the section on anxiety. Don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink or wear. Look at the birds, look at the flowers. Your heavenly Father knows what you need. Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Stott emphasizes that this isn't irresponsibility. Jesus isn't telling us not to work or plan or save. He's telling us not to be anxious, not to be consumed by material concerns, not to trust in wealth for security that only God can provide. This is profoundly countercultural in a consumer society that runs on manufactured anxiety, on the belief that happiness is just one more purchase away, on the illusion that security comes from having enough stuff. Jesus turns to how we relate to others, and again, He's radical. Don't judge or you too will be judged. This isn't prohibiting all moral discernment. It's prohibiting the kind of harsh, hypocritical, self-righteous judgment that condemns others while excusing ourselves. Jesus uses vivid imagery, trying to remove a speck from your brother's eye while there's a plank in your own eye. The antidote to judgmentalism is self-awareness and humility. When we recognize our own failures, our own need for grace, we become gentle with others. We can address sin, but we do it with compassion, not condemnation. Then Jesus gives us what's become known as the golden rule: do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets, he says. Think about the brilliance of this. It's not just don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you, a passive avoidance of harm. It's an active standard: do good to others. Take the initiative in love. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Stott notes that this requires imagination and empathy. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You have to consider their needs, their feelings, their perspective. And then you have to act toward them with the same care you'd want for yourself. This is the ethic of a kingdom where love is the supreme law, where neighbor love flows from God love, where relationships are transformed by grace. Jesus is coming to the climax of his sermon, and he presents a series of stark contrasts. 2 gates, one wide, one narrow. The wide gate leads to destruction, and many enter through it. The narrow gate leads to life, and few find it. Two trees, good trees bear good fruit, bad trees bear bad fruit. You'll recognize false prophets by their fruit. Two foundations. Those who hear Jesus' words and put them into practice are like a wise man who built his house on rock. Those who hear but don't obey are like a fool who built on sand. When the storms come, and they will come, only one house stands. This is where the comfort ends and the challenge intensifies. Jesus isn't offering an easy path. He's offering a true path. He's not saying everyone's fine, all roads lead to God, just be sincere. He's saying there are two ways, and they lead to two different destinations. Stott emphasizes that the Sermon on the Mount isn't a list of suggestions. It's not advice for the spiritually ambitious. It's the non-negotiable ethic of the kingdom. And those who claim to follow Jesus but don't live by his teaching are building on sand. This is countercultural because contemporary culture hates absolutes, hates claims to exclusive truth, hates the idea that choices have eternal consequences. But Jesus doesn't soften the message to make it palatable. He intensifies it. So what is Stott calling us to see in this sermon? He's saying that Christianity, authentic Christianity, is not a mild religious preference that you add to your existing life. It's a complete reorientation of values, priorities, and behavior. It's a counterculture. The world values power. Jesus values meekness. The world pursues pleasure. Jesus calls us to mourn over sin. The world seeks revenge. Jesus commands love for enemies. The world hoards wealth. Jesus calls us to radical generosity. The world builds on image and reputation. Jesus calls us to secret righteousness, hidden prayer, invisible Father-pleasing. At every point, the Sermon on the Mount challenges the assumptions of fallen human culture. And this isn't just first-century culture. It's every culture. Because all human societies, in various ways, are built on pride, greed, violence, and self-justification. The kingdom of God is different. It's a community shaped by grace, characterized by love, empowered by the Spirit, oriented toward the age to come. And those who belong to this kingdom will look strange to the world. There'll be salt that stings. There'll be light that exposes. There'll be a city on a hill that can't be hidden. But here's the question that haunts everyone who reads the Sermon on the Mount seriously. Who can live like this? Who can be pure in heart, completely truthful, free from lust and anger, generous without calculation, loving toward enemies, trusting God for everything, non-anxious in a broken world? Stott is clear. No one can in their own strength. The Sermon on the Mount is simultaneously a description of the kingdom life and an exposure of our inability to achieve it. It drives us to despair of ourselves and to hope in God. This is why the Sermon on the Mount isn't opposed to the gospel of grace. It leads us to it. When we see the standard, we see our need. When we see our need, we cry out for mercy. And when we receive mercy, we receive also the Spirit of God, who begins the long work of transforming us into the kind of people who can live this way. The Christian life isn't about trying harder to keep impossible rules. It's about being transformed by the grace of God so that the impossible becomes possible, the commands become delights, the narrow way becomes the path of life. So what does this mean for us today? It means that the church is not supposed to mirror the culture around it. We're not supposed to baptize the values of consumerism, nationalism, individualism, or any other ism that contradicts the kingdom. We're supposed to be different, noticeably different. When the world sees a Christian community that values the poor in spirit, that mourns over sin, that makes peace, that loves enemies, that forgives freely, that gives generously, that speaks truth, that trusts God rather than wealth, they should see something that doesn't make sense apart from the resurrection. This is why Stott calls it Christian counterculture. Because kingdom values will always be counter to cultural values, and the church's job isn't to be popular or powerful or prestigious. It's to be faithful, to be salt and light, to live the Sermon on the Mount in the power of the Spirit. And this happens not in isolation, but in community. The Beatitudes use plural pronouns. This is a corporate ethic for a new society, the people of God. We live this way together, encouraging one another, correcting one another, bearing one another's burdens, sharing one another's joys. When John Stott wrote Christian Counterculture in 1978, he was calling the church back to its radical roots. He was saying that somewhere along the way we domesticated Jesus, turned the Sermon on the Mount into nice moral advice, made peace with the world's values. But Jesus hasn't changed. The kingdom hasn't changed. The call to a higher righteousness, to salt and light existence, to treasure in heaven, to love of enemies, it's all still there, still radical, still countercultural. And every generation of Christians has to decide, will we live by the values of the kingdom, or will we conform to the pattern of this world? The Sermon on the Mount stands as a perpetual challenge and a perpetual invitation. It shows us what human life looks like when God is king. It shows us what we were created to be. And it shows us that the way to that life is not through human effort, but through divine grace. On that hillside in Galilee, Jesus didn't just teach. He embodied everything he said. He was the meek one who inherited the earth. He was the pure in heart who saw God. He was the peacemaker. He was the one persecuted for righteousness. And he was the one who built his life on the rock of obedience to the Father, so that when the ultimate storm came, the cross, he stood firm. And because he stood firm, because he died and rose again, we can now live the life he described. Not perfectly, not yet, but really. The kingdom has come in Jesus. The Spirit has been poured out. The countercultural community called the church exists in every nation. The question is, will we be that community? Will we let the Sermon on the Mount shape us? Will we be the salt and light the world desperately needs? That's the challenge John Stott laid before the church. That's the challenge Jesus laid before his disciples on that mountain. And that's the challenge before us today.